Many people ask me questions about Stoic philosophy and practice. I've created this series to provide short answers to the most common, recurring, or confusing questions about Stoicism. Why do Stoics focus on negative visualization? This is an excellent question, particularly given that one of the promises of Stoic philosophy for its practitioners is that ultimately they're going to be living a life that is as free and untroubled as possible, free of negative emotions. So it's a little paradoxical, isn't it, to think that by focusing on the negative, on what could go wrong, on what might be heading our way, that we would get rid of these negative emotions. There are very clear benefits to engaging in negative visualization regularly, and we're going to talk about those in a moment. But before that, let's get clear on what we're actually talking about when we use these terms negative visualization, especially since if you read through classic Stoic texts, you're not going to find that term anywhere. Instead, what you're going to see is the Stoics telling you to, for example, keep death before your eyes, and things are going to go well with you. Or before you go into a situation, think about this sort of thing. Or consider all these different possibilities. Or when you go to kiss your wife or child, remind yourself that they are a mortal being and will die, and then you won't be quite so upset when it happens. Which may strike us as very morbid or even cruel. So what's going on here? Are the Stoics indulging in a sort of thinking negative thoughts for the sake of thinking negative thoughts? Are they all downers? Are they all people who are pessimistic? No, that's not the case. And I want to say something about the opposite extreme too. This is not some sort of homeopathy of the mind where you're taking just a tiny, tiny little bit of negativity, almost a trace amount, and that will clear out all the other things that you're going to feel, sort of on the analogy of homeopathy. No, you're going to actually think about, you're going to consider, you're going to visualize things that could go wrong or will eventually happen that we typically view as negative. From the perspective of Stoic philosophy, these are not always negative, but from the perspective of the larger culture, both in ancient times and in our present, these are viewed as bad. If you're at all unclear about what we're talking about, maybe a few concrete examples could be helpful. So imagine that you're heading into some kind of contest, like an athletic contest. You're playing a game against somebody, and there's some stakes. Maybe you've put some money on the game. Maybe people that you care about are watching you and want you to win. Maybe you just are a naturally competitive person, and you think about what could go wrong within the game and all the different ins and outs. You think about your opponents and how you're going to face them. Or if it's something like doing a long jump, you think about the conditions of the track. And you run this through your mind, not necessarily for a long time, but before you actually engage in it. That would be negative visualization. Thinking about the possible loss of loved ones, as I just brought up with Epictetus, is another one. You're in a relationship with somebody and you think, I'm so happy that I have this new relationship. My life feels complete. And you remind yourself that it could end at any moment, that they could be taken away from you for all sorts of different reasons. That's negative visualization as well. Imagine that you've got a very important meeting. An interview, let's say a job interview. You're going in and you're going to try to present yourself in the best way. And you think about the sorts of questions that might get asked that could stump you. Or you consider the matters that you're a bit embarrassed about in your CV or your resume and whether they're going to probe about that. And we could go on and on, all the different things. What happens if you spill coffee on your shirt? What happens if you walk in and it's very clear that you're overdressed or underdressed? How are you going to handle it? These are all negative visualization. I'd mentioned that there are some benefits to engaging in negative visualization, and this is exactly why the Stoics advocate it as a practical exercise to engage in on a broad scale daily, but also to do when we're heading into difficult situations. So what are those benefits? If you're engaging in negative visualization ahead of time, when you actually get to the potentially disturbing event, you will find more times than not that it may still feel bad, but it doesn't feel as bad as if you hadn't done the negative visualization. So that's a very important benefit. Obviously, the further along you get on the Stoic path, the less that you would be disturbed by things. But for the rest of us, this is very important. Another thing that it helps you to do is to think about the possible outcomes and to have a certain sense of perspective on the probability of those. Quite often, the really catastrophic things that we fear or are averse to, they're not that likely to happen. And by reflecting on that, you may feel a bit better about it. It's usually the smaller scale annoyances that are more likely to happen, and then you can focus your energy on that. And that brings us to the third benefit, which is when you think about what could happen and how things might go from your perspective wrong, you can also think about what resources you would have to deal with the situation. What would you need to do in order to be a little bit more prepared? And even thinking about that preparation can sometimes give you the edge so that when you're in the actual situation, time-bound, you can respond in real time in a way that's effective for you in that situation. Finally, the last part is you can also think about, let's say this bad thing does happen, what's still the case? It allows you to appreciate what you still do have. You know, when somebody has a consoling thing, well, at least you have your health. Now, health, of course, is a preferred indifferent for Stoics, but that's still something, quite good, something useful. That's an observation that can be very helpful within the situation. So negative visualization can help us in each of these four ways, and it does some other things as well. Where would you go if you want to learn more about this? As I remarked, if you go to the classic Stoic texts, which I highly recommend, you're going to find them referring to this many times, but not using the word negative visualization. You're also not going to see them using another term which comes about later on, premeditatio malorum, thinking ahead of time about the bad things that could happen. But if you do read, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, you'll see them talking a great deal about concrete examples, general principles, and how to do this. If you want to read the more modern Stoic literature, there's plenty of books out there. All you have to do is type in negative visualization, and you're going to see a number of blog entries and videos come up as well. So there's a vast amount of literature and other material out there that can help you with this. But it is something that you have to practice. You get better at it the more that you do it. If you found this answer helpful for you, then please share it with others who might benefit from it. This work is entirely supported by crowdfunding on my Patreon site. So if you find it valuable, consider becoming a supporter at patreon.com/Sadler.